Can't hear you.
How about now? We're
Yep.
back? All right, all right. Good Wednesday morning. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have got a lot on the docket today to talk through, but I'll open up to the floor. I feel like we've been just jamming through a ton of market updates and news articles and not necessarily opening the floor. Anybody have anything going on a transaction that you think would just be a good discussion for the group? Something happened on a real estate transaction that you're working on that was a little odd. Good experience share.
I can throw one out there, Steve.
All right, let's do it.
So I was at a listing or seller consultation yesterday, and it's a condo over in Chicopee, and there was mold all over the ceiling in different spots, almost throughout the whole house. And there's an old lady living in there, and I don't know, she must not have kids that were like attending to her because she never reported anything. So I asked her, why is there so much mold? And she said, well, we had an ice dam one year. I never reported it. Now that got worse. We had plumbing pipes in the, so it's a slab. So the plumbing is actually in the attic. And she's like, well, those burst. And that's why that section has mold. And then in the bathroom, we just have poor ventilation. So that's why there's mold there. Right. So I don't know. I guess what I'm telling you is there's a couple questions I've never really come across before, which is there a statute of limitations on reporting things to the HOA, right? So if I had an ice dam a year and a half ago, is it too late to go back to them and say, hey, right? Obviously the damage has gotten worse. And then another question would be, those pipes in the attic, I would typically think everything in the attic, roof trusses, shingles, plywood sheathing is all HOA responsibility. So I'm going to try and figure all that out for her because it's a slab. There's copper pipes in there. And then the last piece is the insurance piece, which is okay, if the HOA doesn't want to do anything, how does the insurance work? And is there a statute of limitations on that? I mean, as a homeowner, you're supposed to mitigate anything as quickly as possible. Are they just going to come in and say, hey, you let this sit for a year, like tough luck? So I don't know if anyone else has done anything. That's kind of the research I'm going to be doing for this condo, and just wanted to throw it out there. Maybe I'll bring the responses to next meeting, but at least figured I'd throw it out there for conversation.
Anybody dealt with anything like this? Anybody have any experience?
I haven't, but my heart breaks for her having to live in mold.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So if any of you guys are Seinfeld fans, she looks like the lady that Jerry tries to steal the marble rye from, which was just hilarious. Uh, but yeah, it is kind of crazy. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, is this lady literally sleeping in here? Like I have a feeling it'd be near condemned. But yeah, I will bring back some answers for next week's call. I just figured it'd be a good talking point.
Well, I'll throw my 2 cents in there because I did insurance adjusting for a couple of years. So I can tell you, at least the insurance companies that we worked for, and we worked for probably at least a half a dozen, if not 10 or 12 different insurance companies. And for the most part, they weren't out there to stick it to the insureds. They really weren't. So if it was reasonable, and they had mitigated whatever the issue was, didn't realize that this was even something that they could report, um, but they took care of it, and now somebody's telling them, hey, that could have been an insurance claim. Um, I'm assuming, that there's some limitation where they could deny, but that wasn't the MO of most of the companies that we were working for. If the homeowner, went about their business, they fixed it in a timely manner and just never reported it, and now all of a sudden they're coming back, especially if it was a smaller claim. I was a newer adjuster, so I wasn't necessarily handling, $100,000 plus claims. But, you know, $2,500, $5,000, $10,000 claim, they weren't going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, this happened 3 years ago, you're not getting paid. So for the most part, they were pretty good about stuff like this. Now, if it's just an ongoing leak, right, like that's where you get into issues with insurance. Insurance is looking to cover sudden things that happen. The pipe breaks and water comes out, and now I've got damage, right? A leaky pipe that's just been leaking for years and now is causing mold is not going to be a covered peril, right? It didn't happen all of a sudden. This is just over time, wear and tear, the extensive mold, that could come out of some of these. And then a lot of these policies, mold is specifically excluded unless you've got a mold rider on there. So that's another thing, is what kind of coverage do you actually have? So those are a couple of thoughts of just my experience on the insurance adjusting side of things. Anybody else have a recent experience just around these kind of topics, a delayed onset or a claim that happened, or a loss that happened a while ago that then gets reported? Anybody else have any feedback on something like this? Good. Interesting. Who else has got something interesting going on in one of their transactions? Unmute those mics. Margareta, what do you got?
Hi guys. Actually, it's regarding that mold issue. I wonder, because so this is a condo, so isn't it in the bylaws of the condo that the owners have to be somewhat responsible? Would she be found as negligent? I wonder if she's actually going to have more issues as being negligent to other people, because if a condo mold spreads, what do you do with that? That's like her fault.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely potentially some negligence here. But if it was, hey, something happened, she fixed it, and then she's just left with, she didn't repair the drywall in that area or whatever damage was caused from that. She just said, oh, that happened. I, called the plumber, he fixed the pipes, and now, we've got a limited area. I don't think they're going to, find it negligent for something like that. But if you could see it and now it spreads and now it's going to other units, you could definitely have an issue of not reporting promptly. I think that's probably the language that was in most of those policies. If I'm remembering back, is like the insured has a duty to promptly, pretty much within a reasonable amount of time, report the claim. So now the other thing that we ran into was stuff that was hidden, right? So the insured didn't know that something was happening. They didn't know that the pipe burst and then was leaking, right? So now in those situations, maybe you're going to get coverage for the initial pipe burst. So they're going to come and fix the pipe. Then maybe some initial damage that would have happened from that pipe burst. So, hey, we would have repaired the sheetrock in that area. But now the long-term, hey, the mold stuff, maybe that's where the insurance company goes, all right, that's where we're cutting this thing off. You should have done something here. So it could be like there'll be partial coverage for something. This is just a good time maybe too to talk about public adjusters, right? So the way the whole process works is when these things happen, the insurance company is going to send an adjuster out to look at it, see if there's coverage, and then what is covered and how much is it going to be? Is it going to, hey, we're going to give you $5,000, $10,000 for what happened? If you don't believe that you are getting treated fairly or your client isn't getting treated fairly, that's when you want to get a public adjuster involved. Because I've seen situations where the public adjuster was able to get something that was initially denied covered. Hey, here's why this should be a covered loss and this should not have been denied. And then obviously they can also get you additional repairs covered. So maybe they extend the scope over the initial scope that the insurance company had provided. What do you got, Amber? Are you in a position to chat?
Yeah, so we had a microburst come through in May, had some wind damage, part of our roof came off. Lo and behold, only the parts where the solar panels were not. So thank God for solar panels, I guess. Some other damage. And, this year we decided, because insurance has skyrocketed, that we were going to do a $2,500 deductible versus our typical $1,000 deductible. Saved us a little money. have never had a claim since 1999 when we owned a house. And lo and behold, this happens. So we were kind of debating whether to do a claim because, again, if it's $2,800 or something stupid, it's dumb to put in a claim because, as we know, a lot of people are getting canceled for claims. So we started, the first thing I did that Saturday evening was text my roofer and say, dude, you need to get over here. And he lives close. I don't know if your house got hit, but we did. I need you to look at my roof. So he came first thing Monday morning, and we paid the $1,000 or whatever it was out of pocket for it to be fixed, but got, the receipt. Next thing was, so we went through, and we, other than one, I think we got all of the receipts pretty quickly, and realized that, yes, it was going to be almost double that $2,500. Actually, I think a little bit more than that. So we did put in the claim. I had already talked to my agent who, I'm very close with. And he said, let me know. I have it written down. I have it in the system that this happened. Let me know. And we just, adjuster called me, asked me what happened. I sent him photos and videos of everything. They just took our, every quote we got. And because they were reasonable, we didn't try jacking anything up. An adjuster never set foot on property. They just paid us out.
Yeah, that's something that I think is definitely newer. I don't think there was much of that going on when I was in it, but now, with homeowners having access to video and photo, and, if you can document everything that's going on, they'd rather save the time. They probably have what's called an inside adjuster, just a desk adjuster that's just sitting there. They look at your photos, they write a quick estimate on what they think that claim should be, and then compare it to the estimates that you're submitting. If they're within reason, they'll just approve it. So yeah, I think you're probably going to see more and more of that as things go and move and streamline, and we get more AI involved. I think it'll be hopefully quicker on these turn times. Anybody else around insurance, public adjusters, claims, anything to chat about? Hey, I just had this happen. It's a little twist to what we've discussed.
So I actually just got an email about the permits for the property where everything had been sold, and then it came back around and they were saying that none of the work had been done and permitted. We just got a letter from Stuart about their coverage. If you want to give me like 10 minutes to read it and see what it means, I can get back to, I can jump back in and talk about it.
That would be great. Yeah,
Sure.
That would be great. So that's Stuart Title.
Yep.
For those of you guys who haven't been following this, but so basically she had a client purchase a home with, after they bought the property, they found out that you've got open permits, and it looks like the title insurance company is actually going to cover making these things get up to code. So let's see what they had to say. Awesome.
Yep. So I'll jump back in a couple minutes.
Cool. All right. Who else has got something unique going on one of their transactions that would be good to discuss?
Steve, we just had an inspection yesterday on my first deal, and so she's freaking out a little bit this morning because she got that 10-pound report, and so they had a few issues, and they even mentioned in the text this morning that they're thinking about pulling out. And I said, I texted and said, hey, don't do that. We'll be fine. We just need to work through this. So I guess I was going to talk to Lauren about it as well, but maybe if you want to discuss that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I want to just, when we've covered this one before, but Paul, at any point since you've met this client, have you ever discussed the size of that report that they were going to get? Have you ever showed them a home inspection report before they actually did a home inspection?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so I think this is where we need to up the game, because I don't think many people are doing that. And I think doing that upfront as part of a buyer's presentation, or maybe a second tier to your buyer's presentation, because I think most people's general reaction when they see one of these home inspection reports is, oh my God, right? Like, there's a ton of things wrong with just about everything, including new construction. So they're gonna get freaked. So I think they would have reacted a lot less negatively had you had that conversation. Hey, just to let you know, one of the things that I do with my first-time home buyers, if they are, or buyers that haven't bought in a long time, is I just want to walk you through what a home inspection looks like. Right? Here's a previous home inspection. Everything's whited out, so there's no personal information, but this is what a normal home inspection looks like. And maybe you even just give them a couple, to just lighten the load a little bit about what they're about to experience. And I think, you wouldn't get as much of that, oh my God, we want to back out of this deal. Because now you're up against it. And now to turn around and tell them, oh, it's normal, don't worry about it. To the consumer, it seems like you're just trying to get a commission. Right? You're just trying to push the deal through. When in reality, that's not the case. We don't want anybody to buy anything that we don't feel like is fixable or fixable within reason, or based on the price that they're getting it for is reasonable. So yeah, I think just moving forward, I think the lesson there is try and have these conversations a little earlier.
Yeah, I think it's just the newness of my position.
Sure.
Basically, I was I wasn't involved in sales before, so I mean not in house sales. So
well, I can promise you, Paul, most of the people on the call are probably not going through a home inspection on buyer presentation. And this is where I think we're at. Like, you want to keep more deals together and not spend so much time showing houses and getting 3 or 4 offers accepted. Just change your buyer's presentation and start including this stuff. And I think you're going to keep more deals together. Jay, you had mentioned me. I don't know if you're in a position to chat about scam buyers. You in a position to unmute and chat a little bit?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I'm driving, so I might lose you. Well, me personally, obviously, I haven't, really been in production with buyers all that much the past 3 or 4 years, but I received a lead that reached out to me directly from Agent Finder. So connected with the lead through text message only initially. They told me what they were looking for. They're not local. They're coming from, I believe this one was Colorado. So I took all the criteria, and then we were going back and forth, and very pleasant person to deal with, real positive, almost like a real estate coach. How was your day? Excited. I got these meetings today, blah, blah, blah. So I played along with it, mirrored and matched. Obviously, that's not necessarily my personality, but so I kept trying to get the guy on the phone. I finally got him on the phone, and it was not the same personality that I was used to. He was kind of evasive when I asked him, because he was specifically looking in Northampton. Couldn't find anything on his name, usually, and it's a very unique name, so I figured I would have gotten some kind of a hit. But when I got him on the phone, why Northampton? Why are you thinking about making the move? Personal reasons. Okay. Why Massachusetts? It seemed like a nice place. So I wasn't really getting anywhere with the actual phone conversation. And then after that, I was still getting the positive messages, but then it slowly started going towards what he does for a living, which is crypto and blockchain. Now, I know zero about that stuff. And I told him I have investments, but, it scares me, blah, blah, blah. So I thought that was the end of it, but the conversation always comes back to crypto. So I kind of put him on ice for a little bit. Maybe I'll reach out again, but I'm just getting a weird, like, no movement on the home sale front, not coming out here to tour the area anytime soon. So yeah, red flags kind of went up, and he was taking a lot of my time just responding back and forth to his text messages, but there was no movement there. And then I heard about another agent getting a direct call from, they called their direct Zillow number. And I was told this morning that he thinks it's a scam. I haven't gotten any more details from him on that, though. So always be wary of the scams. I don't know what the heck the scam would possibly be. I mean, maybe the scam is to get me to invest in, crypto, but
Yeah, I think I think that's one of the angles, right? Is he starts to tell you how great he is at crypto, and he shows you some fake proof of funds that he can pay cash 2 million, and I made all my money in crypto, and you should do crypto, and all of a sudden you're wiring money, and you know, Jesus, if this guy made so much and he seems so great, yeah, I think that's definitely where this is going, and guys like high alert on everything, whether it's real estate related or not, on scams right now. The AIs are just getting ridiculously good. The emails are looking like they're coming from Google, coming from Facebook, coming from, you know, Amazon. So high alert right now for sure. Alex, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say we just actually had a very similar situation, except with one of my buyers. They saw a land for sale on the MLS for I think it was like $24,000 for this property, and then after like 30 days or so, they dropped it down to 15,000. So I had a client of mine call right around like 6 o'clock at night. They're like, Alex, we just need you to write an offer. We already spoke with the listing agent. We already negotiated everything. Can you throw up an offer? And I'm like, okay. The offer was with an agent from a Coldwell Banker Realty company. So supposedly she already vetted the seller. Everything is fine. So we throw up the offer. The seller, there was a few like discrepancies to where the seller was out of China. It's like one of the forbidden countries, but because they own the land, we could still sell it. Um, we had a few back and forths with the offer, like the first name, last name versus last name, first name on the contract. I'm like, that shouldn't even matter how it's written. Everything should still go through. Attorney still qualified it. The guy still wanted everything done perfect. So I'm like, whatever, you know, we'll all stay quiet. We'll do that. Lo and behold, we use Leach Tishman for it. Leach Tishman obviously has to get FERPTA involved. FERPTA's coming back saying this guy needs to prove his documentation. So he sends in a picture of his passport and everything else. And what one of the title people at Leach Tishman noticed is that the passport photo looks just slightly a little crooked, and they're like, it looks as if this guy put a picture on top of a passport and is trying to pass it through. And then back and forth, trying to get this guy on the phone. He's answering, he's doing everything right. But now instead of China, he's in Dubai. And then a week later, he's somewhere else and he just can't get to a video. And it's just like so many red flags going up as well, to the point where, I mean, we had extended it multiple times. My buyers are like, this seems legit. Let's still see if we can push through. And little by little, we're finding out that like red flag after red flag, this guy's just not hopping on a video call. And the same thing, like if we went with a different title company, more than likely they would have said, hey, this is enough, because FERPTA attorneys didn't even catch it completely. They were about to say it's okay. It's Leach Tishman that kept pushing, and essentially, come to find out, Devin at Leach Tishman, she goes, I feel very uncomfortable with this situation. Let me reach out to the prior title company who handled this transaction. And she did reached out to the original owner of the property, who was the buyer, the same guy, but or supposedly the same name, but like a few years ago. Come to find out, it's actually a fraudulent transaction. And this guy, whoever he is, that doesn't want to pop up on video, he's sending photos, but photos with AI are so easily made that it seemed too good. And exactly. So, I mean, what we found out is basically the owner's like, I have no idea who this person is. I'm not selling my property. Um,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
yeah, I mean, had we,
at this point, Alex, it's even video is not even enough. I saw one where because they can take that image and then they can turn it into a video image, and that video could hold a conversation. So even if Leach Tishman got this person on a Google Meet, right, it can do AI, and it can respond in the, you know, it'll look like the person. It could even sound like the person if they were able to get a clip, right, of what that person's voice sounds like. So this stuff is it's getting pretty crazy.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
they wanted him to jump on. Because he was actually open to doing a video. They wanted him to jump on a live feed, kind of like a FaceTime or a Google Meet or a Zoom call. And that's the one thing he kept avoiding. That was the biggest red flag for us.
Yeah. I've seen it though. Is they even had video, and the way they caught the one that I saw was they were like, okay, can you raise your right hand? Can you raise your left hand? And it couldn't exactly do that. So, but how far away is that? 6 months? 12 months? Before it'll,
That's crazy.
the AI is going to be able to do all of that stuff. So we just got to be ultra careful. Nicole, I saw your hand up.
I just had a couple things for like what Jay was going through. I've had some stuff like that come through where if you use AI for a good reason, you can actually copy and paste the phone number, the screenshots of the text, the emails. I've had emails come through that look like they're coming from Amazon or other companies. And if you put it in ChatGPT, it will flag 20 things that you missed that prove that it is probably a scam. So use AI for that. And then we had a similar situation, one of our agents on the team, with a seller reaching out. So to sell his land. And it was similar to Alex's situation. They had copies of the license, or yeah, their license, their ID, had his full name, had everything. So we thought it was good to go, especially when we got a copy of that license. But then the phone number kept changing for the seller, and so we were a little skeptical, and things just kept getting like fishier and fishier. Mostly that the phone number kept changing, and if we looked them up in like Fast People Search or anything like that, you couldn't find the phone numbers. But this guy had all the information about the seller. We finally found the seller's actual phone number, called them, and they were not trying to sell their land at all. So it was definitely a scam. But the access that these people have to information to scam is crazy.
Yep, that's pretty crazy. Mike just put in the chat too that anytime you see, can we communicate via WhatsApp? That is definitely a red flag. And then he had a vacant land scam, and he's just recommending send it to the FBI, send it to the local police department to try and track these guys down. Typically, from what I'm hearing, they're not getting anywhere with catching these guys, unfortunately. The way they do it from the countries that they do it from and the way they block the IP addresses, they struggle to catch these guys. So it's really more just about doing every little verification that you can. I'll definitely put a plug in there for 1Password and passkeys. If you're not using some sort of a password app at this point, I think it's, the best $10 a month that you can spend. Get some serious passwords on your stuff, get some passkeys going. It's not going to be foolproof, but I think at this point, we got to have at least a minor level of defense like that. We can't be making up our passwords or having the same password for all of our logins. You need unique passwords for each site, and you've just got that 1Password that you got to remember. I'll put a plug out there too. If you haven't upgraded to iOS 26, if you're an iPhone user, I would highly recommend that. As real estate agents, I feel like we just get a ton of spam calls. I mean, I must get 20 calls a day because our number is out there publicly available. And so just 20 times a day, I got to double click and send it to voicemail. And with the new iOS, you can just screen everything and enforce all of those to voicemail. So I found that just in the past 24 hours to just be a nice little blessing. So if you haven't upgraded, I would highly recommend that you do that. Anybody else on the scams or tech that you want to share, something that you're using or doing that might be a benefit to other agents?
Hey, Steve, I'm just going to throw this out there about that vacant land scam I had. Similarly, all the same things, had all the docs, seemed legit, etc. But when I finally spoke to the actual owner, I found them. I had already called the registry of deeds in Central Mass to see if there was any other flags on the file. And I can only speak to Massachusetts because I don't know if Connecticut does this or other states do this. But the registry said that if the actual true landowner shows up to the registry with their actual, passport and stuff, they can put a note on the file. And if anyone tries to record something or change, do like a quit claim deed, that it will get flagged and they won't record it until getting confirmation from the actual landowner. And so that may not help us as agents prevent something, but it can at least be something we tell our clients who we know either have a vacation home or have land that they're not watching.
Great share. Great share. And I got to believe that's going to become common practice. I don't know how much longer we can go without upping the level of verification on these closings, because you just have no idea. It almost seems like you might have to do something in person, or some other form of verification, because you can fake everything outside of the in-person thing. So it'll be interesting to see how this all evolves. Who else has got something going on one of their transactions? Something unique that you experienced over the past week? What do we have?
I'll throw this one out there for everyone. So I've been working with a client for about 6 months, and they seemed a little bit like a tire kicker, but eventually got him under contract on a very historical home that, from my naked eye, I knew was going to need $100,000 worth of work. We're talking the house is built mid 1800s. It's 4,500 square feet. So no matter how good the owner was, there's going to be messed up electrical. There's going to be older siding, all the different things. We get through the inspection. It comes up as we expect. Have an electrician look over the electrical. Have roofers do this. Have siding guys come check this. And so my client starts to have a meltdown. I get some quotes. At minimum, it needs about 50 grand worth of work from the get-go. But likely 150 for him to turn it into what he wants it to be. But we have a couple days. Finally, we get to the last day of our contingency, and I say, okay, I just need to. And this was an as-is purchase. I just want to make sure, that you are comfortable moving forward, because other, and to win this one, we made our initial $10,000 deposit non-refundable if we backed out post-inspections, which would happen anyways, but he wanted it to win the bid. That's what we did. So last day of our contingency, and I say to him, I just want to confirm we are good. And I sent this as an email and a text because I wanted, communication in writing. And he writes back, has a meltdown. No, I can't afford it. There's going to be too much work. We need to terminate. We need to terminate. We need to terminate. So I said, okay. So I send him the documents. I have him sign it, terminate, and release the deposit. I call the other agent and I say, I have to formally send this to you. I go, but I think if you guys threw 7 or 10 grand at my client, we could keep this together. I go, I can't speak for him, but I think we could. I know we're as is. I know we said we weren't going to come back with repair requests or credit requests. I go, but he's walking away. And she goes, give me an hour. She called me back an hour later. She goes, if he takes 7 grand, we'll give it to him. And so I called my client. I said, hey, I've already sent the termination, so you're safe. Your deposit's safe. We're in good shape. The seller's willing to give you 7 grand closing credit. Is that enough to keep it together? And he goes, give me 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, Mike, I need this house. The 7 grand's enough. We're good. Send me the credit rider. And I just say this as like an allegory to just when your clients are melting down and having this emotional, guttural, overwhelmed feeling, sometimes just take a beat, do what you have to do to protect your client. That was first and foremost what I did. But if he was really going to walk away and because and we could keep it together for $7,000, it was a no-brainer. And the other agent, who's also the seller of the home, called me the day after and she goes, I really appreciate you kind of throwing me that last alley-oop, because I was really nervous about coming back to market and it's a unique property and all the things. And so I just say, even though clients sometimes give up, our role is to stay calm, find a solution, try to throw it out there and see if you can make it work. And if it didn't work, so be it. But it did. And and within 2 hours, I went from losing a deal to getting a deal back together.
Yeah, that's a great share. This is the best part about the business to me, is wheeling and dealing and at the end of the day, you got your client what they want, right? Without agents involved, that transaction doesn't happen. And I think everybody felt like they got a win at the end of that. So and 100% coming back to market, especially the way the market's going right now, I think that agent's going to be extremely scared. So great job and great share. That was good. Who else has got something? Who's got something unique? Feeling like the silence is getting people now to, I got to just get more comfortable with silence because I think it forces somebody to just go all on mute. Katie Sheehan, are you ready for us?
Yep, so I can talk a little bit about this. Okay, so
And I'm just going to give a quick backstory on this, right? So you have the buyer, correct?
Yep, so we represented the buyers. This is actually not the Connecticut one. This is the one where the neighbor, Hale Education, said that they were encroaching on their land, because we have two different claims running right now, one for the permits, one for
Okay.
the other.
Gotcha.
So this is the one that went with Stewart, and this is the one in Massachusetts where the neighbor is saying that, you know, we did our plot plan, everything looked like it was fine, and then, you know, nothing has been changed in 25 years on this property. At least nothing new has been built to it, no new additions. And then 2 months into the ownership of these new buyers who bought in January, the neighbor, which is a larger corporation called Hale Education, they came and said, you know, hey, you know, we were just reviewing our landlines, and it looks to us like you're encroaching on our space. And so they sent a couple pictures that were, you know, no different than, they weren't even off of like the assessor's website. It basically was like a drone shot with like a pinpoint drawing, like someone photoshopped where this is where it goes, which was not accurate. So basically they were saying, we've owned this land, you're a portion of the envelope around your pool decking, and a couple, you know, some of your lawn and some of the mature landscaping is over our line. And so they were trying to figure out ways that we could get this solved. So title company just sent me this, and let me just read that to you, because that I think is pretty, I don't want to keep you like totally bored, but I'll give you an idea of what it says. So basically Stewart wrote back saying, no, this correspondence is from Stewart. Please be advised, you know, a list of all the information that we presented. We've reviewed your case. If any of these items come up, which are all included under the claim that we made, these are the covered risks, and that's just for this section of the policy alone. It says if someone comes back around after you've purchased the property, if someone else owns interest in your title that was not ascertainable at the time of closing, someone else has a right affecting your title because of lease, contract, or option. They have a right that affects your title because of forgery or misrepresentation. So now that's getting into, you know, like you were saying with the registries, putting locks on people's cards, because if something gets forged, if there's a forgery and they put it into the registry of deeds, then that is how you end up with those fraudulent deeds. Next up is someone has an easement on the land. Any covenants for the use of your land. So, you know, if you had an easement saying that you could drive over your own land, you know, or anything along those lines, and someone says that no, you can't anymore because it bothers them, they'll protect against that. Failure to authorize transfer of conveyance. So again, a forged deed. If you don't sign away the conveyance of this property, they will protect the rights of the person who owned it and it was done against. Judicial or administrative proceeding. Electronic recording or recording of electronic document or signature that was signed using a falsified, expired, or otherwise invalid power of attorney that was not properly authorized, executed, created, witnessed, sealed, acknowledged, notarized, and was not properly filed, recorded, or indexed. So all of those items, I think this is kind of Stewart's way also of stepping into what the registry is starting to do now by putting a lock on and a freeze on these things. Unfortunately, anytime you're dealing with an insurance, you're not dealing with protective in the way moving forward. You're dealing with, what do I do now that the problem has already occurred? So this is all after the fact things that could be done, not something that you can do proactively to stop it. Next up, if someone else on your title puts a lien. Yeah, so if someone else puts a lien on your title, a lien for the real estate taxes, government authority or payable due or unpaid, a mortgage, a judgment lien, state or federal tax lien, condo association lien, statutory lien. If someone else has an encumbrance on your title, right, fraud, due, or duress, if you have actual vehicular pedestrians to and from the land, so the right to pass and repass over your land, forced to remove or remedy a violation existing at the date of policy. So this is where, this is kind of like, you know, you've got a tree on your land and it's arching over onto your neighbor's land, that's this type of thing. Like, even though it is something that's on your land and your responsibility to maintain, because it's crossing over onto your neighbor's land, there's a higher duty. A violation or enforcement of any law, ordinance, permit, or government regulation for the occupancy, use, and enjoyment of the land, the character, dimensions, or location or improvement, the subdivision of the land, or environmental remediation. Enforcement. I feel bad. I feel like I'm just listing things off to you guys. I'm going to put you all to sleep.
Do they basically come back and say, and your situation doesn't fall into any of these, or do they come back and say, and based on, bullet point 13 above, this is something that's covered?
So they're saying they literally sent over a list of 31 things that would be covered just specifically that could relate to the claim that we filed. So it is the inclusion amount is pretty astounding. I'm very impressed right now, to be honest. What they're saying is that it most likely and the most active that it would fall under is number 21, which are you are protected if you are forced to remove any portion of your existing structures because they encroach onto your neighbor's land. If the encroaching structures are boundary walls or fences, and the amount of insurance or covered risk number 21 is subject to your deductible amount and our maximum dollar amount of liability shown in Schedule A, which is based on the purchase price of the property, meaning, and then if you got an expanded policy versus standard. So we go back to number 21, scroll down to the bottom, and they're saying that as of right now, because no claim has been filed through the courts, there's no court of law saying that they need to remove that piece of the pool yet, and that the neighbor is only asking what we can do to correct it. They're saying, we're not going to close this file. We're going to keep it open. But at this time, there's nothing for us to go to bat for you. There's nothing for us to protect you against. So we don't need to go to court and tell them, put an injunction on they're trying to like dig up that edge of your pool or anything like that. They're saying we're keeping it open. And at this time, it does fall under number 21. And that if it does go forward and a case is filed or something, if they ask you to pay money to fix any of that, we will go to bat and protect you on your behalf. So they did step up and say they would do it. They said just as of right now, they don't have anyone to go after to pay off or any of those things because it hasn't been filed in courts yet. We're still in that conversation stage between neighbors. But I mean, from what it looks like here, they absolutely are like, nope, we agree. Here's everything it could fall under. Here's what we do think it specifically falls under, and we will protect you. And even though we don't find that right now there's anything for us to do, that protection remains open. The claim will remain open for 6 months automatically unless you call in to close it out. And if you, at the 6-month time, they'll reach out and let us know that if it's about to be closed, and if we want to continue keeping it open, then we can.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. Basically saying, hey, you're covered, but they got to sue you first.
Right. So again, very much like we were talking about,
Yeah.
It's not a proactive step forward. Like, hey, they're telling me that this is a problem. So how can I, what can you do to help me? And they're like, we can't even step in to help you until they come after you for it. So until they make some kind of aggressive step towards you and say like, all right, we haven't heard from you, so we're going to go ahead and, we're going to do a survey that's exacting, and then we're going to charge it to you. Even at that point, title insurance would step in and they would say, that's fine, we're going to cover the cost of that survey minus, whatever the deductible is, but we're going to step in and cover that because now you're telling our client that they need to do something. As of right now, they were just asking questions like, hey, did you notice, did you see? And I think it all has to do with the wording of that email as well, which was very,
vague.
It was not forceful at all. So I have a feeling that they knew what they were doing. But essentially it says as soon as they tell you you need to do something or that you need to remove something or a claim has, been filed in the courts, we will go forward and we will take care of that on your behalf. So yeah, that's heartening on that end. Hopefully in the next couple of days, I guess I'll find out about the permit one because these were both filed within days of each other.
Cool. Keep us updated on the permit one because that one's even more unique in my mind that they're potentially willing to pay to bring stuff back up to code or close out permits. That'll be interesting. Anybody have any title insurance questions? Kate.
I do have one. I heard that Caddick, at least in Connecticut, is now searching for permits because of issues like what you're saying, buying something, not realizing the basement wasn't permitted, etc. Is it standard for title? I mean, I know we advise our clients during our due diligence period if they have questions or concerns to go to the, you know, building department and pull their own file before you're done with the inspection contingency. But is it standard for title insurance to search these things? Because I know it's like the each town's is unique in how you can get access to these files. So it sounds like it'd be really laborious for the title companies to be doing this work up front.
Yeah, it's not common. Catechist started doing it in Connecticut specifically. And one of the things that we had talked about with this particular issue is that this file was in Connecticut, and in Massachusetts, we have protections written into our purchase and sale. Like, it's one of the first things that goes into my buyer rider, saying, you know, that the seller agrees to close out any open permits and that no work has been done that was not permitted during their ownership. And Connecticut doesn't have that included in the purchase and sale. So I wouldn't be surprised if Caddick is doing their own searches down there, but it is not standard for title or for title attorneys even to do the legwork to go and check those permits, because it is different. It is, you know, town to town, city to city, who they'll speak to, how will they close it out? If they find something that's opened, if it's over 2 years old, now it can't be closed. It's going to remain open forever, but not actionable. So there's so many moving pieces to that. So if ever this comes up, I always, especially, you know, I'll talk specifically on Massachusetts because we work on drafting the purchase and sales, whereas we don't in Connecticut. In Massachusetts, if you have a property that you are listing and that you have a buyer who is purchasing, I always say, like, I will write my permit language right into my buyer to protect you. Most other attorneys are now asking it to be deleted, which is acceptable as long as I know there are no open permits. And so a really good kind of just thing to check is, as soon as you have a property that's under agreement, just go and reach out, check and see if there is anything open. And then if the attorney comes back to me and says, hey, I want this language removed, you can step right in and just say, actually, there's 2 open permits for this and this from, you know, numbers of this used for windows and siding or whatever the case may be. And give, you know, if you have the years, that's even better, because then it's, you know, who opened it versus the other, because they're trying to now say that it's buyer's due diligence, which it's buyer side due diligence, certainly, but I don't think the buyer themselves knows what they're doing, which is why they have professionals like yourselves and like myself and like a title company coming up on their behalf as well. I don't know that it's going to become the norm, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the field, before it gets to title insurance, if it becomes the norm in your area to, like, consistently, okay, opened a new file, or even with your sellers and your listing agents, you know, I just got this new listing. First thing I want to do is check and see if there are open permits and see if there's anything that I need to do before we get to that place. So that would be, you know, I'm not surprised that Connecticut is doing that if the title insurance companies are doing it, but I'm glad to see that they are. I don't think it's going to happen in Mass, though.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the process? And I think we made that adjustment with our transaction coordinators. It is now a step, I believe, and I'm making a note here to just check that we are doing it on both sides. When we take a listing, talking to the seller, having them call the town, and then on the buy side as well. Just the earlier that we can nip this stuff in the bud, you know, on most of these, I don't think the seller's, you know, doing it on purpose or is even aware half the time. But the problem is when we find out, you know, 2 weeks before closing, it's a lot harder to get these things resolved than before we bring the house to market or as we're putting the deal together. What else? Katie, I also had you down for chatting about buying or selling with tenants. I'm assuming, I think that was you that sent me that. You've had some issues?
Yeah, so I have been running into more and more issues with properties that are transferring with tenants. Um, I think, and again, I don't think it's, you know, any misfeasance. I don't think the sellers are trying to be difficult or trying to mislead in any way. I think they just maybe don't know what is required of them as a landlord. I just recently had a file where the seller, it was a 2-family, both units were occupied. She was having trouble with the first floor tenant because the tenant wasn't happy that it was being sold, wasn't happy that there were open houses, did not want people coming through the house, was being very difficult at those open houses and causing problems so that nobody wanted to stick around the open house and even see the property. So she really made it very difficult. And they decided between themselves that the easiest thing to do would be to let her out of her lease early and let her, go off and get a new place and find somewhere to go, and then allow the sale to go through without her having to deal with being a tenant throughout this process. So Everyone thought that was totally fine, no big deal. Then it comes down to actual closing time, and the buyer is saying, "No, I don't want you to release her. I want to get this property with a tenant involved." And and as we had put up front that this tenant was going to be leaving, the lease, parties had agreed to terminate the lease. It would be delivered vacant. So their buyer is saying that they want to take the property with the tenants on board. The tenant is flat out refusing. The landlord had used the security deposit and the last month's rent for this last month that they were, the tenant was going to be leaving to cover that. And the security deposit, they had utilities that they split, and there was a utility amount that they hadn't paid for. And the tenant said, "I don't have any cash, just take it out of the security deposit." So now we're up to closing time. The first floor tenant is leaving in 2 days, and there is no longer a lease. The buyer wants full last month's and security because they're saying that the tenant never should have been released from the lease. And it just snowballed into this ridiculous ongoing thing that really what we ended up needing to do is the deal canceled because for other reasons. But there was no way that the tenant was going to remain going through the process. There was no way that the landlord was going to come up with the additional funds for the security deposit that was being held. There was no way that the buyer was going to accept it without that tenant on the first floor, even though they had been given notice up front. So we all just decided to terminate and go our separate ways and start fresh at that point.
We needed Mike Saki in on negotiations for that
Yes.
seller to put this thing back on the market for last month's in security. They're going to end up getting less than that the next offer that comes around.
But by the time it came around, absolutely, I have no doubt. There was, but and that's just one. I had another one the other day where the seller absolutely refused to get tenant estoppel certificates signed. And I said, okay, well then if you don't have tenant estoppel certificates, we were lucky enough that the tenant estoppel certificates were not written into the purchase and sale as a requirement of closing. But in that case, you're then required to provide the lease instead, because you do have to provide something that shows the amount of funds that are being collected, that's being held, when it's due, what is covered, what utilities, all of that, including just contact information for the tenant. So they're saying, I'm not going to bother them. I'm not going to send this out. If I send this out, it's going to upset them. But really, people, I think, they seem to feel like everything is an attack or they're going to get in trouble for it. Those tenant estoppels, it protects the tenant more than anything because it's the tenant certifying, yes, I put the security deposit on hold, and so now that amount has to transfer over to the new buyer, and that new buyer has to honor the security deposit that I put down. So if someone is giving you a hard time, if you have a tenant who's giving you a hard time about signing those estoppel certificates, try to explain it to them like, this isn't something the buyer needs you to do for the sale. It is, but this is something that's going to protect you with the new owner and the new landlord, that confirms everything that you've done and set up with your prior landlord, and now that new landlord has to honor it. So I think putting that in place and really kind of turning the script from being like, we need this or we're not going to be able to sell. In instances that is the case, but more importantly, reframing it as, hey tenant, this is something that's really to your benefit. This is going to make things better for you in the long run. I think that's a better way to phrase it. But I've just had more, folks refusing to sign estoppels, attorneys who refuse to do the adjustments on the CD. They want a separate check brought to closing, and that's their prerogative. It's not my favorite way to do, rentals. I like that all written out, but it's a not very streamlined process, and there are a lot of ways to get to the finish line. And I think you're right. I think Mike Saki would probably get us there better than anybody else and figure out the right ways to do it. But that's something that I'm running into. And I just think sellers aren't aware of what stress, and they're under stress themselves trying to sell a house. And I don't think they consider oftentimes the stress that they're putting on the tenant who's now going to be switching and in this unsure mode. And I think having estoppel certificates and having an upfront conversation about how much access these, people are going to have to the property, explaining to them like, listen, we're going to try to be as respectful as possible. It's never going to be, it's never going to break your lease. You're always going to have 24 hours notice, but we do need times that we can access the property. And, I think starting that rapport and having that conversation with the tenants so they feel more a part of it, so that they don't feel like things are being done to them, is a much better way to handle the situation. Have you guys run into that? How do you handle when things like that come up with your tenants?
Well, I think being proactive is the way to do this one, and I think most sellers don't want to disrupt their tenant. I don't even want to tell them that I'm selling it. I don't even want to sign out front. They get nervous about the tenants, and I'm with you. I think the better way is to just be upfront. This is what's going on. I'm going to protect you and make sure that your lease is upheld, and we're going to get everything documented, and nobody's going to put you out of a place to live. You have a lease in place. You're good. But who's got different scenarios? What else has come up? Anybody have a unique scenario with a tenant? What's the Margaretta? Go ahead.
So, more recent multifamily was selling and it was fully occupied. And the tenant did move out. And actually, don't be afraid of that happening, because ultimately it allowed a bigger pool of buyers, because sometimes there's owner occupancies, dependent on your financing is dependent on it. So this way, it allowed having one tenant, one unit vacant, not a big issue, actually was preferred, and it increased the price of the home ultimately. So it's something like that. About the estoppel, how do you call that? Estopos, Katie? Yeah.
Certificate, yep.
Yeah. Okay. I've had to deal with that on a unit recently, and I'm not very clear what is that exactly, and can you explain that more in more detail? I would really appreciate that.
Yeah. So a lot of times when you have a month-to-month tenant, there is no lease in place. And if there's no lease in place, then there's no way for the attorneys to appropriately and accurately adjust the rental prorations, the security deposit, because we don't know what's being held. An estoppel certificate is really just a form, and it says, the address of the property, unit 1, 2, or 3, whatever it is, you list that down. Who's on the lease or who is the primary person. So it's usually going to be if there's a family of 4, it's going to be both parents, and then anyone else residing in the premises. It's going to then list the parties who are in the property. So they're going to list the kids if they're underage. If they've got grandma living with them, they'll be listed. It's just a listing and letting everyone know who is going to be in that unit. It then will include what is your monthly rent, what is, if any, the security deposit you put down. Did you pay last month's rent up front so that the new buyer landlord knows not to collect that again or to try to collect it? What utilities are split? Are you paying for your own internet and electric and the buyer's paying for the water? What is the split that you have going on for any utilities? And then it just lists down all of that information. And really what it does is, a lot of times, even if I have a lease, I want a tenant estoppel certificate because I want to make sure that they match. I want to make sure that the tenant is aware of what they're paying and what's in holding, and that it matches the lease that the landlord has provided, so that I know it's correct. Other times, like I say, if it's month to month and you don't have a lease in place, this will act as kind of a certification of a signing by the tenant saying, this is what I pay, this is what I've put in security deposit, I have paid last month's. So when I go to make my adjustments on the closing disclosure, I know that I need to collect the full security deposit from the seller. I need to collect last month's rent from the seller, and I need to do a proration of the rental amount for that month, so that we don't have to go back afterwards and say hey, did you collect January? And if you didn't collect January, I'm going to need it back. And it just turns into kind of a rigmarole. That's what the estoppel certificate is. It's just a certification by the tenant of what they pay, what they've put in, what is covered, who's in the property, and just allows us to certify.
That was excellent. Thank you so much.
It protects that tenant, but it also protects the new landlord, where the tenant can't come back and say, well, I gave the security deposit already, or I gave the last month, or no, the rent is $700 a month, not $800 a month, so it prevents all of that. Well, but the last landlord told me I could do this, or I paid that, or it'll clean all of those things up. Yeah. And I would agree with you. I think even if there's a lease in place, most times those leases haven't been updated. They change the rental payment without doing an update to the lease, right? They raise the rent, they change the security deposit, they collected something or gave something back, or it's just almost never whatever was in that originally signed lease.
Right. And if it's an old lease, if you've had a tenant there for, 10 years, that lease could be so outdated for what you're working on now. It really, it always amazes me that tenants are like, I'm not going to sign this. And I'm like, but this is the only thing in this whole package here that's protecting you. This is your certification so that you get, your fair shake.
Yep. Yep. All right, guys. Well, we went a little bit over here today, but this is the most engaged you guys have been, which always puts a smile on my face. So I appreciate you guys stepping up and bringing your unique scenarios. And I just look forward to doing it again next week. So take your notes and bring your unique experiences to share with everybody, because I think, or hopefully everybody learned a little something on today's call. So go have a great week, and we'll do it again next week. Take care.